Now, the pragmatic trials in the cardiovascular field, aspirin is one of them, although with this adaptive trial, we are still left to guess which is the optimal dose, because this has been one limitation of the trial, these drop-ins and drop-outs. But in Europe, I understand the European side of cardiology are trying to get it organized in a kind of consortium of countries, which may lead to more cardiovascular pragmatic trial. Are you aware of this experience so far?
I'm not involved in it directly. I know about it. And, I think that this is in principle, is a good idea to try to alert people to the opportunities that we have in Europe to do big trials to answer questions that are important for clinical practice. So, I mean, the more countries that are involved, obviously, the more complexity there is. And very often, it's possible to do a trial in a single country, just as Adaptable did. And there's no particular advantage to having lots of countries involved when one country could do the job. It might make us feel good to have 6 European countries involved, but if one could do it, then that's a more efficient way of doing it. And certainly we should not have a system whereby countries contribute a small number of patients just because it's a collaboration. That's incredibly inefficient. And often it's driven by regulators who say, well, you've got to have at least 10 patients from such a country in Europe before we'll give you a license in that country. This is just a nonsense. So I think that the thought process has to be, what is the most efficient way to answer a question? And in Europe, where that would involve, let's say, 10 European countries collaborating within the ESC framework, great, let's do that. But if it was the case that one country could do it on its own, that would be even better.
Well, that's a really very important topic, because search of making trials global has other virtues, but when it comes to one single continent, it's fine. But then you may need also to generalize the results globally to different ethnic groups and different geographical regions with different healthcare systems, and therefore going global may be beneficial. Tell me more precisely about your next trial, whether it is a pragmatic or non-pragmatic. What is keeping you busy right now?
Well, personally, I'm working on the EMPA-KIDNEY study, which is looking at empagliflozin in patients with chronic kidney disease, with particular emphasis on people who, as you know, the gliflozins have been shown to be very effective in delaying renal disease progression in people with diabetes or diabetic kidney disease. And we've got a very big contingent of people in our study. We've now finished randomization, about 6,600 patients. We're looking at people without chronic, without diabetes mellitus, because blocking the enzyme in people without diabetes makes just as much sense. And so we believe that this is a very important question. 2/3 of patients around the world with kidney disease don't have diabetes. And so this is a very important question. And the other aspect of our trial, which is a bit different to previous studies in CKD, the Credence and DAPA-CKD studies, is that we're looking at people with very little proteinuria, who have more advanced and those who have more advanced CKD, because clinicians who are going to be using these drugs need to have a good understanding of their effects in a wide range of patients with CKD. And so it's great that we've got 2 trials, but we think we can add a bit more information to help reach all those at risk of outcomes in this patient population.
But correct me if I'm wrong, this is a classical design trial, not a pragmatic one, right?
Well, we have elements of pragmatic design. So, for example, And I'm glad you asked that question, because I can dispel the notion that just because this is, it's funded by Boehringer Ingelheim, in University of Oxford, and receives a grant to run the study. So we are running the study just as we would any other study. And so we immediately start about how to identify patients efficiently. So study centers were not able to be registered as study centers until they had identified a minimum number of patients. And so this is a way of identifying those centers that can actually recruit. What you don't want when you're running a big trial is lots of centers that recruit 2 or 3 patients. That's just so inefficient. And actually the quality of the data from a center where a nurse is only seeing, let's say, 2 or 3 patients in the whole trial, they never get a feel for the trial. So we have now finished recruitment, as I say, and we've randomized 6,600 patients in 8 countries. So if you think about that, that's many fewer than would be involved in typical trials. Most big studies like that in a disease like CKD would have 30 or 40 countries, but each country has contributed many hundreds of patients, and in some cases over 1,000 patients. So you say this is just a classical design. No, it isn't. It's a pragmatic design. It's a streamlined design. I prefer that term. It's much more descriptive of what we're trying to achieve. And we go through the whole trial just thinking, how can we design this in a way that is streamlined? We still get the information that satisfies the regulators that we're doing things properly. We still have monitoring and training, all these things that go with clinical context and with the type of trial it is. We still collect information on safety, but we do it in a streamlined way.
So why is it that there is some resistance? I mean, listening to you, we would just go straight ahead for pragmatic design. We believe that the future is pragmatic. So why is it that the uptake of pragmatic and streamlined trial is low?
I think it's because when you talk to people, particularly in the regulatory side of companies, who, after all, much of the work that we do is in collaboration with companies, the regulatory affairs departments are terrified that they will be inspected and found wanting. And so there is a mismatch between what those at the top of the regulators are saying about the need for streamlining and the need for quality by design, which is the systems that would partly developed by PICOR-Net collaborators. Those who lead the regulatory agencies say we should be doing this, but at the level of the inspector, the message ain't getting through. And so you have, quite rightly, many concerns that there is regulatory risk to simplifying systems. So it's in progress. I think that progress is being made, but we've had to argue very strongly. We've many arguments with companies with which we collaborate about how it does make sense to simplify and to streamline, and then to make the arguments to regulators that what we're doing is appropriate. But I think many companies just really feel that they don't want to take the risk. They'd rather spend the money and have no risk.
Colin, you made the point very clearly, but is it the companies or CROs? Because there is an element with the contract research organization who are resisting the move because they're making good business from the classical design trial, right?
Well, CROs don't put the money in, the companies put the money in. The companies put the money into the CROs, and then the CROs will, to some extent, do what they always do, and they have no particular interest in simplifying. So you're right that the CROs are part of the problem, but there is a need for us to really get back to basics and think, what are the elements that are required to give us reliable results? At the end of the day, we must not forget that there are patients out there, and that we are charged with producing information that is reliable to inform patients and their doctors. And I worry that this obsession with excessive regulation leads to smaller trials, and they are less reliable trials by definition because they do not have enough information on which to make a judgment about treatment and care. So I think that, and this is a very widely held view here in Oxford, that we should be simplifying and we should be making the arguments for it. And regulators, at a certain level, there is a lot of buy-in, but we still have the problem that many inspectors don't seem to have that view, and that is a problem.
Well, we are getting there. I'm sure after this discussion, people will learn more about these virtues of pragmatic trials. Thank you so much, Colin. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm sure that in the future we'll see a few more of these pragmatic trials, streamlined, actually, preferably. Europe, I understand, are getting organized through European Society of Cardiology, at least in the cardiology field. So it's all good news, and it's good that it is a learning experience. What we have seen with Adaptable is certainly done some failures, which we need really to mitigate in the future. Thank you so much. Any final word before we close out? Any other final recommendation?
Well, the only thing I would say is that let's hope that we can get rid of the word pragmatic over time, because I think it is a bit misleading. I think streamlined is a much more sensible, accurate description of what we're trying to achieve. There's a danger that people think that pragmatic means that you just throw the trial at what's happening in the real world, and that does not result in good trials. That what you have to do is think about the elements that you're trying to optimize. It's very much an engineering type approach to trials.
Wonderful conclusion. Semantic, streamlined is indeed a preferred word. Thank you so much. And I hope that everybody will learn from you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.